As we consider the fruit of the Spirit that is to be cultivated within the heart and life of every believer, the second one on the list calls for pure joy to pervade our thoughts and our actions. Good morning. This is Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Tuesday. As the Apostle Paul enumerates this list of fruit that is produced by the Spirit in the believer's life, in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 22, he says that joy should be cultivated and it should be evident within us. He says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Against such there is no law. Now, I read somewhere that joy was defined as pleasurable feelings or emotion caused by some success or good fortune. But I disagree with that definition. If you're having good feelings due to outward circumstances, that is what a person calls happiness, okay? Someone else said, joy is that unshakable feeling of well-being despite our outward circumstances. I like what Billy Graham wrote in his book, Hope for Each Day. He said, happiness depends on circumstances, but joy depends on our God. Now, we are really describing an inner feeling here that we should have because we believe in God. You know, when the Beatitudes say phrases like, blessed are the merciful, it is actually describing an inner joy or a contentment that these people feel that is not really changed by outward circumstances. I find it interesting that the theme of Philippians is joy or rejoicing. And Paul uses this phrase over and over again when he writes to his friends in the church at Philippi. Now, there are a few interesting facts to note about this city and the church that Paul is writing to. First of all, if you'll go back and look in Acts chapter 16, Paul and Silas were beaten with stripes while they were in Philippi. They spent a night in prison there where they enjoyed a midnight prayer meeting. There was an earthquake, and they witnessed the conversion of the jailer during that time. Paul also writes about the persecution that has been felt by the church since he left that city. He says in Philippians chapter 1 and verse 27, be not in any way terrified of your adversaries. So they had faced some struggles too. He tells the church when they show joy in the midst of adversity, it is a great testimony to their faith in God and the deep-seated contentment that the Spirit gives his followers. By the way, Philippians is also called a prison epistle. You see, it means that Paul wrote these words while he was being confined as a prisoner back in Rome. Yet he continued to write about joy and rejoicing. He also commands the Philippians to let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who became a servant, who humbled himself to the death on the cross of Christ. And the writer of Hebrews chapter 12 verse 2 says, he endured the cross, despising the shame, all for the joy that was set before him. And he is now seated at the right hand of the throne of God. It is the reward at the end of this life that should bring us joy despite our temporary circumstances here. This world may bring persecution, it may bring pain. The circumstances that we face may be unbearable at times, but that does not mean that we can lose our joy. We can still have joy in the recesses of our mind and within our heart. Joy should not be an emotion or a feeling, but a deep-seated decision that we choose every day. And just as fruit has to be planted and tended to have a great crop, joy is one of those things that needs our daily care, our nourishment, and certainly our faith in God in order for it to flourish. Joy should also be evident on the outside by a contentment, a lack of frustration by things or people or other circumstances. Today, let's choose to have joy.